My pa used to say a man's worth ain't measured by what he takes, but by what he gives when he's got nothing left to lose. I didn't understand that till the mornin' I found two Apache women tied to a post in Copper Bend, Montana Territory, 1879. And that mornin' cost me everything. Then gave me more than I ever knew I needed. Dawn came cold that day. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache before you even step outside. Fog rolled down from the mountains, thick as wool, settling over the timber town like a wet blanket. Copper Bend wasn't much to look at on a good day. Collection of rough-cut buildings, a main street churned to mud by wagon wheels and 1,000 careless boots. It smelled of sawdust and sweat, of pine resin and horses, of men working hard and living harder. I rode in from the high country just after sunup, my Appaloosa picking his way careful through the ruts. Had 3 weeks' worth of pelts strapped to my saddle. Beaver, mink, couple of prime wolverine. Enough to get me through another month if I was smart about it. The town was waking up slow. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys. A dog barked somewhere down by the mill. The steady thump of an axe against wood echoed from behind the livery. That's when I saw them. 2 women. Apache, by the look of them. Tied to a wooden post right in the center of town, in front of the general store where everyone would have to see. Their wrists were bound separate around the timber, arms pulled back at angles that had to hurt. They'd been there a while. You could tell by the way they held themselves. Tired, but not broken. Scared, but not panicked. A sign hung above their heads, rough letters carved into a plank of pine. Apache thieves, let them stand till sundown. The older one stood tall despite everything. Dark eyes that didn't ask for nothing from nobody. Face like carved stone, proud and hard. Couldn't have been more than 25, but she'd lived enough for 40. Her hair was braided tight against her head, every strand controlled. A small scar on her right cheek caught the early light. Battle mark, probably. This was a woman who'd seen violence and survived it. The younger one had her eyes closed, lips moving in some kind of prayer or song. Couldn't hear the words, but I knew what prayer looked like. Known it all my life. Her hands were trembling. Not from cold, though it was bitter enough for that. From fear held in check by will alone. People walked past. A baker stepped out of his shop, wiped flour from his hands on his apron, glanced at the women like they were part of the scenery, then went back inside. A woman with a basket slowed for maybe 3 seconds, her face showing something that might have been pity, then hurried on. 2 loggers stood by the saloon, coffees steaming in their hands, watching the women the way you'd watch a dog you weren't sure about. Nobody spoke to them. Nobody asked what they'd done or why. The silence was deliberate. This was meant to be seen, not questioned. I tied my horse at the far rail, away from the crowd. Checked the knot twice. Old habit. Took my time about it, giving myself a moment to think. 3 years I'd been in these mountains, keeping to myself, avoiding towns except when I had to come in for supplies. 3 years of silence and solitude, which was exactly what I'd wanted after Mary died, after little Sparrow died. But something about those 2 women pulled at me, something in the way the older one held her head high, something in the way the younger one prayed quiet, not making a show of it. They reminded me of people I'd failed once, people I'd watched suffer because I didn't act fast enough. I walked into the general store. Mrs. Thornton stood behind the counter sorting through a crate of canned goods. She was a decent woman, far as I knew. Widow. Ran the store herself after her husband died in a mill accident 5 years back. She looked up when the bell above the door jangled. "Morning, Bear," she said. Hadn't seen that name in written form for years, but everyone in Copper Bend called me that, on account of the scar on my neck. Grizzly got me back in '76, nearly took my head off before I put a knife through its heart. "Morning, Mrs. Thornton," I said. Set my bundle of pelts on the counter. She glanced at them, nodded approval. "Good quality. Give you $12 for the lot." "Fair enough." I looked out the window at the 2 women. "You seen them Apache women outside?" Her expression tightened. "Hard to miss. What'd they do?" She hesitated, hands pausing in their work. "Sheriff says they stole bread. Gonna leave 'em there all day." All day. In this cold. For bread. I looked at the loaves stacked on her shelf. How much bread? 1 loaf. I didn't say nothing for a moment. Just looked out that window at those 2 women, at the way the older one's jaw was set, at the way the younger one's shoulders trembled. 1 loaf of bread. For that they'd tied them up like animals, left them on display for the whole town to judge. They pay you for it yet? I asked. Mrs. Thornton shook her head. They didn't take it from my store, Bear. Sheriff just said that's what happened. I never reported nothing stolen. I picked up my money, folded it careful, tucked it in my coat. Then I did something I hadn't planned on doing when I rode into town that morning. I walked back outside, walked straight to that post, didn't run, didn't announce myself, just walked like I had every right. The older woman's eyes tracked me. No hope in them, no expectation, just awareness. She'd noticed me noticing them. That was all. Up close I could see more. The way the rope had rubbed their wrists raw, the dirt on their clothes that spoke of days on the run, the way they both breathed shallow and controlled, conserving energy. These weren't soft women. These were survivors. Where you think you're going, Bear? I turned. Sheriff Dutch Cooper was crossing the street, hand resting casual on his gun belt. Cooper was maybe 42, thick through the middle, with a face that had gone red from too much whiskey and too little shame. He worked for Colonel Harrington, everyone knew that. The colonel owned half the timber rights in the territory, and Cooper made sure nobody interfered with his business. Cutting these ropes, I said. Kept my voice level. Wasn't looking for a fight, just statin' fact. You got no right. Cooper's hand moved closer to his pistol. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. Let him see that I wasn't backing down. I got the only right that matters. They're human. They're Apache. They're thieves. They stay tied till sundown. I pulled my Bowie knife from my belt. 10 inches of steel, honed sharp enough to split a hair. I'd had that knife since Tennessee. It had saved my life more than once. Cooper's eyes widened. His hand closed around his gun grip. But I didn't give him time to think about drawing. I turned to the post and cut the first rope. 1 clean stroke. The fibers parted with a sound like a sigh. The older woman pulled her hands forward, slow and careful, rubbing her wrists where the rope had bit deep. Bear, don't. I cut the second rope. Same clean stroke. The younger woman gasped, almost fell. I caught her elbow, steadied her. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. Just looked at me with those wide, frightened eyes. This ain't over, Cooper said. His voice had gone tight. You just made a real big mistake. Maybe, I said. Wouldn't be my first. I slid the knife back into its sheath. Walked back into the general store, aware of every eye on me. Aware that I'd just stepped into something I couldn't step back out of, Mrs. Thornton stood frozen behind her counter, hands clutched together. I need a loaf of bread, I said, and a canteen of water. She didn't move for a moment. Then, slow, she reached for a loaf. Her hands were shaken. Bear, Colonel Harrington owns this town. You know that. I know it. I set coins on the counter. More than the bread and water cost. Keep the change. Outside, the 2 women stood where I'd left them, rubbing circulation back into their hands. They looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not gratitude. Not quite. Something more complicated. Something that said they'd been helped before and it hadn't ended well. I held out the bread. The older woman took it, broke it in half without hesitation, and gave the first half to her sister. Only then did she take a bite of her own. That told me everything I needed to know about her. Eat, I said. Then you walk east. Don't stop. The younger one ate like she was starving. Probably was. The older one ate slow, controlled. Watching me. Watching Cooper, who stood across the street now with 2 other men. Timbermen, by the look of them. Big fellas with axes on their belts. Why you help? The younger woman asked. Her English was broken but clear enough. Don't rightly know, I said. It was the truth. I'd stopped thinking about why 3 years ago. Now I just did what seemed right and dealt with the consequences after. The older woman looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something in Apache to her sister. The words were soft, musical almost. The younger one nodded. I turned to leave. Had a long ride back to my cabin. Had pelts to cure and a fence that needed mending before winter really set in. Had a life that didn't involve other people, which was exactly how I'd wanted it. But I heard footsteps behind me. Turned. The two women were following, maybe 10 paces back. Not running to catch up, just walking the same direction. I said walk east, I told them. We walk, the older one said. You walk east too. I do, but I ain't taking on passengers. We not ask ride, we walk behind. I looked at them, really looked. Their clothes were worn thin, their feet were bare, cut up from rocks and rough ground. They were hungry, exhausted, and probably hadn't slept in days. But they stood straight, proud. Not begging, just stating that they were going to follow and there wasn't much I could do about it. Fine, I said. Keep up. I mounted my horse, turned him toward the high country and started riding. Behind me I heard their footsteps, steady, determined. I told myself they'd turn back after a mile, after 2, after they got tired or scared or realized I wasn't going to help beyond cutting those ropes. But they didn't turn back. We rode and walked for near 2 hours before I stopped at a creek. The sun had climbed higher, burning off some of the fog. The mountains rose up ahead, pine-covered and eternal. This was the country I loved, high and clean and empty of people who wanted things from you. I dismounted, let my horse drink, started a small fire, took some jerky from my saddlebag and set 2 sticks to roasting the dried meat. When it was warm, I handed a stick to each woman. Didn't say nothing. They took them without thanks. Ate slow, making it last. The younger one watched my horse while she ate. He was a good animal. Appaloosa stallion with a coat like spilled paint, white spots on brown. She reached out careful, touched his nose. He snorted, tossed his head. She jumped back. He don't bite, I said. Didn't look at her. Just kept tending the fire. Just don't like strangers. Like his owner. The older woman made a sound. Might have been a laugh. Might have been something else. Horse have good sense, she said. I glanced at her. First time I'd seen anything like humor in her face. You saying I got bad sense? You cut rope for Apache. That not good sense in Montana. Depends on what you call good. She studied me for a moment. There was something sharp in her eyes. Intelligent. This wasn't a woman who missed much. Most white men call it stupid. Most white men are wrong about a lot of things. That got another almost laugh. She looked away, out at the mountains. We are Naiche and Kaita. I am Naiche. She is my sister. Names. They were giving me their names. That meant something, I knew. Meant they saw me as more than just another white man who might turn on them the moment it was convenient. Jacob, I said. Most folks call me Bear. Naiche nodded once, like she was accepting that, filing it away. Then she said something in Apache to Kaita. The younger woman looked at me, then quickly away. What'd you tell her? I asked. That you have ghost in eyes. She paused. Like us. I didn't answer that. Couldn't, really. She was right. I did have ghosts. Mary. Little Sparrow. They followed me everywhere, quiet and insistent. Reminded me every day that I'd been too slow, too late, too afraid to act when it mattered. We kept moving. The terrain got rougher as we climbed. Pine trees closed in, thick and dark. The air got thinner, colder. My cabin was another 5 miles up, nestled in a valley where the wind couldn't reach, and the game was plentiful. About a mile from home, Naiche stopped sudden, held up a hand. I reined in, watched her. She crouched, touched the ground, ran her fingers through the dirt, brought them to her nose, sniffed careful. Bear, she said. Big one. Go west. Maybe 1 hour ago. I swung down from my horse, looked at the tracks she'd found. 5-inch claw marks in the soft earth, fresh. A grizzly, full-grown male by the size, And if it had passed through here an hour ago, it might still be close. "Your pa teach you to track?" I asked. She nodded. "Before soldiers kill him," she said it plain. No emotion, just fact. Her father was dead, killed by soldiers. Probably during one of the campaigns to force Apache onto reservations. Probably while trying to protect his family. "Your pa taught you well," I said. "We go around. No point looking for trouble." She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. "You are smart, man. Just old enough to know when to run." We detoured west, adding another half hour to the journey. Kaita stayed close to her sister, nervous now. She'd seen what a bear could do, probably. Most people out here had. Bears didn't just kill you, they took their time about it. As we walked, Kaita spotted a plant growing near a fallen log. She made a small sound, excited, hurried over and plucked several stems, examined them close. "This is good medicine," she said. Her English was rougher than Nietzsche's, but her enthusiasm was clear. "Stop blood, help wound. My grandmother teach." I recognized the plant. Yarrow, grew wild all over these mountains. I'd seen it 100 times, never knew what it was good for. "I got yarrow growing near my cabin," I said. "Didn't know what it was good for. You can take what you need." Kaita looked up at me, surprised. Then she bowed her head slightly. Apache way of saying thanks without words. She tucked the yarrow into a fold in her dress, careful as if it was gold. When we finally reached the cabin, the sun was sinking toward the horizon. Long shadows stretched across the valley. My place wasn't much. Single-room cabin I'd built with my own hands, using timber from the surrounding forest. Solid construction, thick walls to keep out the cold, a stone chimney that drew smoke clean. Beside it stood a smaller structure, half shed, half storage. Used to be where I kept tools and supplies. Lately it had just collected dust. Behind the cabin, almost hidden by a stand of aspen, were 2 graves. Simple wooden markers. One said, "Mary." The other said, "Little Sparrow." I'd carved them myself, hands shaken so bad I could barely hold the knife. Hadn't visited them in months. Couldn't bear to. Nietzsche saw the graves. Stopped. Looked at them for a long moment. Then looked at me. Didn't say nothing. Didn't have to. "You two can sleep in the shed," I said. "I'll bring blankets." She nodded. Kaita followed her toward the smaller building. They disappeared inside. I unsaddled my horse, rubbed him down, gave him oats and water. Then I stood there in the fading light, wondering what in the hell I'd just done. I'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this. People. Responsibility. The chance to fail someone again. And now I had 2 Apache women sleeping 20 feet from my door, women who were probably being hunted, women who'd brought trouble right to my doorstep. But when I thought about riding into town that morning and doing nothing, about leaving them tied to that post, I knew I couldn't have. Some things you can't walk away from. Some things demand you act, even when you know it'll cost you. I brought blankets to the shed, set them inside the door without going in, gave them privacy. That was important. They'd had precious little of it lately, I figured. When I went back to the cabin, I made a simple supper. Salt pork and beans, biscuits that came out hard as rocks because I'd never been much of a cook. I set 3 plates on the table. Hesitated. Then I walked to the shed and knocked. "Food," I said. They came out slow, wary, like they expected a trap. But they followed me inside, stood near the door until I gestured to the table. "Sit." They sat. I served the food. We ate in silence. The only sounds were forks against tin plates and the crackle of the fire. I watched them from the corner of my eye. The way Nietzsche checked her sister's plate first, made sure Kaita had enough before taking her own share. The way Kaita ate careful, like she was afraid there wouldn't be more. After the meal, Nietzsche stood and gathered the plates without asking. I opened my mouth to tell her she didn't have to, then closed it. Realized she needed this, needed to contribute, needed to not be helpless. Kaita wiped the table with a rag, movements precise. When she was done, she looked around the cabin. Her eyes landed on a shelf near the window. There were a few books there. A Bible Mary had brought from Boston, a book of poems, a leather journal. She pointed at the journal. "What is this?" "Belonged to my wife," I said, "before she died." Kaida pulled her hand back quick. "Sorry. I not mean to touch. It's all right. She'd want someone to read it." I paused. "If you can read." "Little," Kaida said. "Missionary teach us. Before soldiers come, before soldiers come. Another loss, another thing taken from them. I wondered how many times they'd had to start over, how many times they'd built something only to watch it burn. That night, I lay on my bed, listening. The cabin walls were thick, but I could hear small sounds from the shed, the rustle of blankets, a whispered conversation in Apache, the sound of Kaida singing something soft, a lullaby maybe. It reminded me of the songs Mary used to sing to Little Sparrow. I closed my eyes, tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept seeing those two women tied to that post, kept seeing Sheriff Cooper's face when I cut them loose, kept thinking about Colonel Harrington, who owned half the territory and didn't take kindly to people interfering with his business. Tomorrow, I knew, everything would change. Cooper would tell Harrington. Harrington would send men. And I'd have to decide just how far I was willing to go to protect two women I barely knew. But for tonight they were safe. For tonight they had a roof over their heads and food in their bellies. For tonight, that was enough. I thought about my pa's words, about giving when you got nothing left to lose. I'd lost everything 3 years ago. Lost Mary. Lost Little Sparrow. Lost myself in a way. Been living like a ghost ever since, haunting these mountains. Maybe that's why I cut those ropes. Maybe when you got nothing left, you got nothing left to fear. And maybe, just maybe, that's when you can finally do something that matters. The last thing I thought before sleep took me was this. I didn't save them today. I just gave them a chance. What came next, we'd face together. Morning would bring its own troubles. But tonight, under a Montana sky full of stars, 3 ghosts found shelter under one roof. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence in my cabin didn't feel quite so heavy. Dawn broke clear and cold, the kind of cold that makes you feel alive, makes every breath sharp in your lungs. I woke to the smell of smoke, which was wrong. I hadn't lit the stove yet. I grabbed my knife and moved to the door, then stopped. Through the window I could see Naichi outside feeding wood into the outdoor fire pit. She'd already drawn water from the well, filled the buckets, set them near the door. Kaita was sweeping the porch, methodical and quiet. They'd been up for hours by the look of it. I stepped outside. The morning air bit at my face. Naiche looked up, nodded once. No words. Just acknowledgement. "You didn't have to," I said. "We stay, we work. Apache way." I looked at the neat stack of firewood, the swept porch, the filled water buckets. They weren't waiting to be taken care of. They were claiming their place through labor, through contribution. I understood that, respected it. All right then. I pointed to the fence line running along the eastern edge of my property. "That rail needs mending. Wood's split. You know how to work wood?" "I learn," Naichi said. We walked to the fence together. I showed her how to split the rail, how to angle the chisel just right so the wood came apart clean. She watched close, asked no questions. Then she took the tools and did it herself. First try came out rough. Second try was better. Third try was perfect. "That's good work," I said. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled a length of leather cord from her dress, used it to bind the new rail to the post in a pattern I'd never seen. An Apache technique, I figured. When she was done, the joint was tighter than any I'd made. I looked at it, impressed. "That's better than mine. Apache build to last winter. You build to last summer." I laughed. Couldn't help it. It was the first time I'd laughed in months, maybe longer. Fair point. We worked through the morning. She was quick and capable, didn't need much instruction. After a while we fell into a rhythm. I'd measure and cut, she'd fit and bind. Didn't need to talk much. The work spoke for itself. Kaita spent the morning in what used to be Mary's garden. It had gone wild after she died, choked with weeds and volunteers. But there were still useful plants there if you knew what to look for. Kaita moved through it like she was reading a book, touching leaves, smelling stems, nodding to herself. Around midday, I heard horses, lots of them. The sound came from the east, riding hard. My hand went to my knife before I thought about it. Naichi heard it too. She straightened, eyes sharp, scanning the tree line. Inside, I said, "Now." She didn't argue. We ran for the cabin. Kaita was already at the door, face pale. She'd heard them too. We got inside and I barred the door, moved to the window. 5 riders came into the clearing, horses blowing hard. Sheriff Cooper led them. Beside him rode a man I didn't know, lean and dangerous looking, with a gun belt that had seen plenty of use. The other 3 were timbermen, big fellas with axes and rifles. They stopped in front of the cabin, didn't dismount. Cooper's face was red, angrier than I'd seen him yesterday. "Bear, you're harboring fugitives. Hand 'em over." I stepped out onto the porch, left my rifle inside. Didn't want this to turn into a gunfight if it didn't have to. They're not fugitives. They're free women. The lean man laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Ain't no such thing as free Apache, old man. Name's Clem Harker. But folks call me Mad Dog, and I'm here to collect." So that was Mad Dog Clem. I'd heard stories. Fast gun, faster temper. Killed 6 men in Montana Territory alone, always on the right side of self-defense. Always working for someone with money. Naichi stepped out of the cabin before I could stop her. She had a hammer in her hand from the repair work. Held it loose but ready. "We not hide. We here." Cooper's face twisted. "You got no right to be here, squaw." The word hit like a slap. I felt anger rise hot in my chest, hotter than I'd felt in years. "Don't use that word on my land." Clem's hand moved to his gun, casual but deliberate. "Or what, Bear? You gonna stop all 5 of us?" I didn't answer, just stood there, hand near my knife. It wasn't much against 5 armed men, but I'd been in worse spots. Sometimes being willing to die was enough to make other men think twice. Then Naichi spoke, and her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You want us? You take paper from judge. Not from thief." Cooper's face went dark. "Thief? You're the one who stole bread. We not steal bread." She stepped forward, still holding that hammer. "We hungry, but we not thief. You are thief. You work for Colonel Harrington. He want Apache land. We see his men mark trees. We witness." The silence that followed was heavy. Cooper's face had gone from red to pale. Clem looked at him, eyes narrowing. Behind them the 3 timbermen shifted in their saddles, uncomfortable. "3 moons ago," Naichi continued, her voice steady and clear, "we see Harrington men. They come to valley with big trees. Apache family live there. Man named Gray Wolf. Wife, Morning Rain. 2 children. They have cabin, have treaty paper. Harrington men say leave. Gray Wolf say no. They burn cabin. They kill family. All of them. We hide in trees. We see. We remember." My blood went cold. She was talking about murder, massacre, and she was saying Cooper had been there. "You're lying," Cooper said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "We see you," Naichi said. "We see Mad Dog Clem. We see men with eagle symbol." She pointed at Clem's coat. "That symbol. Harrington symbol." Clem's hand tightened on his gun. Boss said no witnesses. The words came out before he could stop them. Soon as they did, his face changed, realized what he'd admitted. Cooper swore, low and vicious. "So that's why you want 'em," I said. "Not 'cause they stole bread, 'cause they saw you steal land, saw you murder for it." "You got no proof," Cooper said. "We are proof," Naichi said. "We stand in town square. We tell everyone." Cooper looked at Clem. Clem looked back. Some kind of understanding passed between them. Then Cooper straightened in his saddle. "You got 48 hours, Bear. Then we come back with a warrant. And next time, we won't ask nice." Clem smiled, cold and mean. "See you real soon, girl." He looked at Nietzsche like she was already dead. She stared back, not giving him the satisfaction of fear. They wheeled their horses and rode out, kicking up dust. I stood on that porch till the sound of hoofbeats faded, till there was nothing but wind in the pines and the hammering of my own heart. "They come back," Kaita said from the doorway. Her voice was small, frightened. "Yeah, they will." We stood there in the yard, the three of us, while the afternoon sun climbed higher. Finally I gestured back toward the cabin. "Come on, we need to talk." Inside I made coffee, strong and black. My hands were steadier than I expected. Years of control and fear, I supposed. We sat around the table, steam rising from our cups. "Tell me everything," I said. Nietzsche's hands trembled around the coffee cup. She told me what she'd already told Cooper, but this time with the details that haunted her sleep. The exact words Grey Wolf had spoken before he died. The sound morning rain made when she fell. The smell of smoke mixed with blood. Kaita's voice broke when she spoke of the children trying to run. When they finished, I sat there for a long moment, coffee gone cold in my hand. I'd known men did terrible things, but hearing the raw pain in their voices, the way they remembered every moment because they'd had to stay alive through it, that hit different. "If you saw it," I said slowly, "you can testify. But we need someone to listen, someone with power." "Who listened to Apache?" Nietzsche's voice was bitter. "We tell people in town. They say we lie. They tie us to post. I know someone. Judge Hosea Grant. He's circuit judge. Fair man. Rides through Montana territory on a regular route. When he come?" That was the problem. Grant's circuit was unpredictable. Could be next week, could be next month, and we didn't have that kind of time. "We got 48 hours before Cooper comes back," I said. "We need help now." I stood, paced to the window. Thought about who I knew in Copper Bend. Not many friends. I'd kept to myself too long for that. But there was one man who might help. One man who'd never liked Harrington's methods. "Reverend Stone," I said. "Ezekiel Stone. He runs the church in the colored section of town. Good man. Fair man. If anyone'll stand with us, it's him." "We go now?" Nietzsche asked. "Not yet. First we prepare. If they come back tonight, we need to be ready." I spent the afternoon teaching them to fight, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Took down my Winchester rifle, showed Nietzsche how to load and aim. She learned fast. Had steady hands, good eye. Made sense, since she knew archery. The principles were similar. "You don't shoot to wound," I told her. "If you pull that trigger, you shoot to stop. Understand?" She nodded. "I understand." "Kaita. I taught different things. How to reload cartridges fast, how to signal danger with a whistle, how to move quiet and stay hidden, how to throw sand in a man's eyes if he got too close. We built barriers, stacked firewood in front of the windows thick enough to stop a bullet, dug shallow trenches near the approaches to the cabin, covered them with brush. It wasn't much, but it might slow someone down, might give us the seconds we needed. As the sun dropped low, we prepared a meal together. Nietzsche made soup using rabbit I'd trapped the week before. She added wild onions and roots Kaita had gathered, herbs I didn't know the names of. It smelled better than anything I'd cooked in 3 years. Kaita attempted to make cornbread, using a recipe she'd found in Mary's old journal. The bread came out dense and hard. I tried to bite into it, had to work at it. Nietzsche looked at her sister, then at me, and something that might have been a smile touched her lips. "First time Kaita make," she said. "Need more practice." Kaita looked embarrassed. "Sorry. Still better than my cooking," I said. "I once burned water." Kaita blinked. "How you burn water?" "Don't rightly know, but I managed it." Nietzsche laughed. It was a small sound, quickly stifled, but it was real. Kaita giggled. And for just a moment, sitting around that table with lamplight warm on our faces, we weren't 3 people waiting for violence. We were just people sharing a meal. Then the moment passed. Reality settled back in. We cleaned up in silence, each of us thinking about what the night might bring. 2 in the morning, I heard them comin'. I'd been dozing in a chair by the window, rifle across my lap. Naichi was upstairs, positioned at the bedroom window. Kaita was in the back room, ready to put out fires if they tried to burn us out. The sound was faint at first, horses moving slow, trying to stay quiet. 6 of them, I counted from the rhythm. They stopped about 100 yards out. Then nothing, just silence and darkness. "They're waitin'," Naichi whispered from above, "trying to make us nervous." I kept my voice low. "Don't give 'em the satisfaction." The attack came sudden, a shout from outside, then the sound of horses rushing forward. I saw torches light up, maybe 4 or 5. They were going to try to burn us out first, force us into the open. One of the lead riders hit the trench we'd dug. His horse screamed, went down hard. The rider flew over its head, hit the ground with a thud I could hear from inside. The others pulled up short, confused. "Now!" I shouted. Naiche fired from upstairs. The shot was clean, took one man in the shoulder. He yelped, dropped his torch. I fired through the window, aiming for center mass on another rider. Hit him in the leg. Not a kill shot, but enough to put him down. "The barn's on fire." Kaita's voice, high with panic. I swore. They'd split up, come at us from 2 directions. I ran to the back of the cabin. Through the window, I could see flames licking up the side of the shed where the women had slept the night before. In the firelight, I saw a man with a torch, reaching for the main cabin. I threw open the back door, rushed him before he could react. Caught him in the chest with my shoulder, drove him into the ground. The torch flew from his hand, landed in the dirt. He swung at me, caught me on the jaw. Stars exploded in my vision. I swung back, felt my fist connect with bone. We rolled in the dirt, grappling. He was younger, stronger. But I'd been fighting since before he was born. I got my hand around his throat, squeezed. His eyes bulged. He clawed at my arm, desperate. Then went limp. I staggered to my feet, breathing hard, picked up his torch and threw it in the water trough. The shed was still burning, but it was stone at the base. Wouldn't spread if we were careful. Inside. I ran back to the cabin. Through the front window I saw Mad Dog Clem dismounting. He had a revolver in each hand, moving toward the door with the confidence of a man who'd done this before. I grabbed my rifle, but it was empty. No time to reload. Clem kicked the door open, wood splintering around the lock. He stepped inside, guns up, smiling that cold smile. "Just you and me now, Bear." He fired. The bullet took me high in the shoulder, spun me around. Pain exploded hot and immediate. I fell against the table, knocked a chair over. Blood ran warm down my chest. Clem advanced, taking his time. "Gonna enjoy this." Then Naichi was there, coming down the stairs fast. She had a cast iron pan in her hands, swung it like a war club, caught Clem across the back of the head. He staggered, turned. She hit him again, and again. The third blow dropped him. She stood over him, breathing hard, pan still raised. Her eyes were wild, fierce, not the look of a victim, the look of a warrior. "He's done," I managed to say. My shoulder burned like fire. She dropped the pan, came to me, pressed her hand against the wound. I hissed through my teeth. Outside I heard shouting, then hoofbeats retreating. Cooper, pulling back, leaving Clem behind. Kaita appeared with cloth and the yarrow she'd gathered. Her hand shook, but her face was set, determined. She packed the wound while Naichi held me steady. The pain was enormous, like being branded with a hot iron. But I'd been hurt worse. "You hurt because of us," Naichi said. Her voice was tight. "Been hurt worse." "What we do now?" Kaita asked. "Now," I said through gritted teeth, "we ride to town, find Reverend Stone, and we make this public." By first light, we were on the trail. I'd bandaged my shoulder as best I could, arm in a sling. Left Clem tied up in the shed, still unconscious. We rode 2 horses, me on one, the women sharing the other. My Appaloosa didn't like carrying double, but he tolerated it. The ride into Copper Bend took 3 hours. Every jolt sent fire through my shoulder. But I kept my face steady, didn't let them see how bad it was. They had enough to worry about. We came in from the north, avoiding the main street. The church stood at the edge of town, simple whitewashed building with a cross on the steeple. Ezekiel Stone was outside, chopping wood for the stove. He was a big man, 60 years old but still strong, with hands scarred from a lifetime of hard work. He looked up when he heard us coming, saw my bloody shoulder, saw the 2 Apache women, and his face went hard. "Heard you cut 'em loose," he said. "Also heard Cooper wants 'em back. What you need, Bear?" I told him everything Nietzsche had told me, about the massacre, about Harrington's land grab, about Cooper and Clem and the 12 men who'd murdered an Apache family in cold blood. Ezekiel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his axe and looked at Nietzsche. "That true?" "Every word," she said. "I believe you." He nodded, slow. "Harrington's been buying up land dirty for years, but nobody listens to me. I'm just a black preacher, and nobody listens to Apache." "Then who listen?" Nietzsche asked. "The people. If we make this public, in front of everyone, in the town square." "Cooper won't let that happen," I said. "Then we don't ask Cooper. We ask Judge Grant." "Grant's not here." Ezekiel smiled. "Actually, he is. Rode in this morning. I saw him at the hotel." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since we'd left the cabin. "Where is he?" "Probably still at the hotel. Drinks his coffee slow. Let's go find him." Judge Hosea Grant was exactly where Ezekiel said he'd be, sitting in the hotel restaurant with a newspaper and a cup of coffee. He was 62 with white hair and beard, eyes sharp behind spectacles. When he saw us approach, he folded his paper and waited. "Bear McAllister," he said. "Been a while. And you brought interesting company." "Judge Grant, I got no time for pleasantries. These women are witnesses to murder. Harrington's men killed an Apache family for land." Grant set down his coffee cup, slow and deliberate. "That's a heavy accusation. You got proof?" "I am proof," Nietzsche said, stepping forward. "I see. I remember. I tell." Grant studied her for a long moment. "Apache testimony ain't recognized in most courts. You know that. Then your law is broken." The corner of Grant's mouth twitched. Might have been the start of a smile. "You're right. It is, which is why I'm going to do something about it." He pulled out a pocket watch, checked the time. "I'll hold a public hearing. Tomorrow, noon, town square. Everyone invited. Harrington, Cooper, whoever wants to speak." He looked at me. "But here's the deal. You keep these women safe till then. If they don't show up, there's no hearing. They'll be there. One more thing. Harrington's got men. You got what, the 3 of you?" Ezekiel cleared his throat. "I can gather folks from my congregation, 20, maybe 30 people." "Do it," Grant said. "This needs witnesses. We spent the rest of the day gathering support." Ezekiel took us house to house in the colored and Mexican parts of town, places Harrington's influence didn't reach as deep. Most people were scared. Harrington controlled jobs, controlled credit, controlled land. Crossing him could mean losing everything. But some people stood up anyway. Mrs. Abigail Thornton, the store owner, agreed to come after Nietzsche spoke to her. "I don't want trouble with Harrington," she said. "But I saw you tied to that post. Saw the way people walked past. That ain't right." Miguel and Rosa Garcia, a Mexican couple who'd lost their water rights to Harrington in a shady deal, said they'd testify. "We bring friends," Miguel said. 10 families. Old Pete Jenkins, the blacksmith, agreed to stand with us. He was 72, a veteran of some forgotten war. "I fought for what's right," he said. "This ain't it. I'm in." By evening, we had promises from nearly 40 people. Not an army, but enough to fill the square. Enough to make Harrington think twice about violence in front of witnesses. We spent that night at Ezekiel's church. He had a back room with cots. Nietzsche rebandaged my shoulder, gentle but efficient. The wound was clean, thankfully. Bullet had gone straight through. "You should rest," she said. "So should you." She sat beside me instead. We were alone. Cayeta had fallen asleep on one of the cots, exhausted. Outside, I could hear Ezekiel talking with some of the men who'd agreed to come tomorrow, making plans. "Why you do this?" Nietzsche asked suddenly. "You lose everything. Your home, your peace, maybe your life." I'd been expecting that question, had asked it of myself a dozen times. I looked at my hands, scarred, calloused, marked by years of work and worry. "I told you about my wife," I said. "About Mary. You say she die. With daughter." "Yeah. But I didn't tell you all of it." I took a breath. It hurt, but not from the shoulder wound. This was a different kind of pain. Mary wasn't just my wife. She was a teacher. Came out to Montana from Boston to teach Apache children on the reservation. That's where I met her. I was working as a surveyor for the Army, mapping territory. She was the only white woman who'd talk to Apache like they were people. I paused. The memories were coming fast now, after years of keeping them locked away. We got married in the winter of '73. Small ceremony. The Apache kids she taught came. Sang songs. It was beautiful. Nietzsche was quiet, listening. We couldn't have children of our own. But there was a little Apache girl at the reservation. Her parents had died in one of the campaigns. No family left. Mary wanted to take her in. I said yes. We called her Little Sparrow. She was 5 years old. Sweet kid. Loved to sing, just like Mary. My voice broke. Had to stop for a moment. Nietzsche didn't push, just waited. Winter of '76 was brutal. Worst I'd ever seen. Fever came through the reservation. Started with the children. Mary caught it first, nursing the sick. Then Little Sparrow got it. I tried everything. Rode 2 days through a blizzard to get medicine from the fort. But by the time I got back, Mary was gone. Little Sparrow died 2 weeks later. I finally looked at Nietzsche. She was watching me with those dark eyes, full of understanding. "You asked why I help," I said. "It's because I didn't help last time. I was too slow, too late, too afraid to leave them alone while I went for help. I thought I could save them myself, and I was wrong." Nietzsche reached out, placed her hand over mine. It was the first time she'd touched me without a reason, without tending a wound or steadying me. Just touch for the sake of connection. "You not fail them," she said. "Winter fail them. Fever fail them. You fight. That is honor. Don't feel like honor. Because you still here. Still fight. That is Apache way. Fight till you can't. Then fight more." We sat there in the lamplight, her hand on mine, while outside the night deepened, and somewhere in town, Harrington and Cooper were making their own plans. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow we tell the truth. Whatever happens after that, we face it together." She nodded. Together. And for the first time since Mary and Little Sparrow died, I didn't feel like I was facing the world alone. Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. We woke early, prepared careful. Nietzsche wore a simple dress Rosa Garcia had given her. Cayeta braided her sister's hair in the traditional Apache way. I shaved, put on my cleanest shirt. We weren't going to war. We were going to tell the truth. And we were going to look like people worth listening to. The town square started filling up around 11. Word had spread fast. By the time we arrived, there must have been 100 people there. Maybe more. Ezekiel's congregation stood on the left side, a wall of determined faces. Miguel Garcia and his extended family took up the center. Mrs. Thornton stood with other shopkeepers. Old Pete and the other veterans formed a line near the front. On the right side stood Harrington's men, loggers mostly, hard men who'd been told their jobs depended on Harrington keeping his land deals quiet. Sheriff Cooper was there, looking nervous. And seated in the front, calm as Sunday morning, was Colonel Wade Harrington himself. He wore a black suit, immaculately tailored. His beard was trimmed perfect. He looked like money and power and civilization, looked like everything these people respected and feared. Judge Grant sat behind a makeshift bench, a thick law book in front of him. He hammered his gavel against the wood, and the crowd went quiet. "This hearing," he began, his voice carrying across the square, "is to determine the validity of accusations made by Nietzsche an Apache woman, against Colonel Wade Harrington and Sheriff Dutch Cooper. All parties will have the chance to speak. Any disruption will result in removal. Are we clear? Murmurs of agreement. Grant nodded. Sheriff Cooper, you want to start? Cooper stood, cleared his throat. Your Honor, these women are fugitives from San Carlos Reservation. They stole bread. They should be returned to federal custody. Mrs. Thornton, is this true? Grant asked. Abigail Thornton stood, hands clutched together. They took one loaf. I didn't report it. They were hungry. That's still theft, Cooper insisted. I'll decide what's theft, Grant said. Continue. Harrington stood then, smooth and confident. Your Honor, I'm a businessman. I buy land legally. These accusations are slander from women trying to avoid justice by inventing stories. Miss Nietzsche, Grant said, approach. Nietzsche walked forward. Every eye in that square followed her. She stood before the bench, back straight, chin high. She was terrified. I could see it in the tension of her shoulders, but she didn't show it in her voice. Tell us what you saw, Grant said. Nietzsche spoke for 10 minutes. She recounted the same events she'd told Cooper and Jacob, but this time she added what she'd been too frightened to say before. The number of men, 12, the color of their horses, bay and sorrel. The exact words Clem shouted before firing. She spoke clearly, deliberately, never wavering. Every eye in that square stayed fixed on her. When she finished, the square was silent. Then Harrington stood. This is absurd. Apache testimony is worthless. She could be saying anything. That's not for you to decide, Colonel, Grant said quietly. Then Kaita stood. She was shaking, but she walked to the front anyway. I see too, she said. I see little girl run. Man chase her. Shoot her in back. She only 5 years. Like me when I lose mother. Several women in the crowd gasped. A child. They'd killed a child. That's when Miguel Garcia stood up. Your Honor, I got something to say. 3 months back, Harrington's men came to my ranch, said I owed water rights. I showed them my deed, legal deed from 1865. They burned it, said it was my word against the colonel's. I lost my land. Old Pete stood next. I fought at Gettysburg, he said. Lost my brother there. We fought for what's right. This ain't right. I believe these women. More people stood. A seamstress who'd lost her shop to Harrington's bank. A ranch hand who'd been run off his property. A widow whose husband had died in suspicious circumstances after question in one of Harrington's timber surveys. One by one, they stood, and Harrington's face went from confident to concerned to barely contained rage. Your Honor, he said, voice tight, these are unsubstantiated claims. Where's the proof? Where are the bodies? Where's the burned cabin? That's when Red Sky Walking Bear walked into the square. The crowd parted like water. Nobody spoke. They just stepped aside, making a path through the center of the square. And through that path walked a man I'd thought was 200 miles away. Samuel Walking Bear. Red Sky I'd called him for 15 years, ever since the day I'd pulled him out of a frozen river and he'd looked up at the sunset and said it was the color of blood and hope mixed together. He was 68 years old now, hair white as fresh snow, worn long in the traditional way. He wore buckskin decorated with quill work, patterns that told stories if you knew how to read them. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Not since the week after Mary and Little Sparrow died, when he'd come to my cabin and sat with me in silence for 2 days because he knew words wouldn't help. Red Sky walked slow, deliberate. Not because he was weak, because he wanted everyone to see him, wanted them to understand that what came next mattered. He carried a leather bag, worn smooth with age. State your name, Judge Grant said. I am Samuel Walking Bear. The Apache call me Red Sky for the color of the dawn on the day I was born. I am friend to Jacob Bear McAllister. I am elder of my people, and I have come to speak truth. Harrington stood. Your Honor, this is irregular. We can't just allow anyone who walks in off the street to testify. This is a public hearing, Colonel. Public means everyone. Grant looked at Red Sky. Continue. Red Sky opened his bag. When Naichi told her story to Bear, Bear sent word to me, asked me to go to the valley she spoke of, to see if what she said was true. He pulled out a piece of charred wood, maybe 6 inches long. The crowd leaned forward, straining to see. I found the cabin. What was left of it. The logs were burned, but the foundation stones remained, and on one stone I found this. He held up the wood. Carved into it, barely visible under the char, was a name. Gray Wolf. Apache tradition, Red Sky said. We carve our names into the threshold of our homes, so our spirits know where they belong. The silence in that square was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on soft ground. Red Sky reached into the bag again, pulled out a misshapen lump of metal. This is a bullet. Found it melted in the ashes. From a large caliber rifle, the kind carried by white men, not Apache. Then he pulled out something that made several women in the crowd turn away. A small piece of cloth, burned and stained dark. A child's dress. You could still see the pattern on it, flowers and birds, the kind of thing a mother might make for her daughter. This was buried under the collapsed roof, Red Sky said. Too small for adult. This belonged to child. He set the items on the judge's bench with a gentleness that spoke of reverence. These are not just things. These are evidence. These are proof that a family lived, that they died, that someone tried to erase them. Grant picked up the carved wood, examined it close. Colonel Harrington, how do you explain this? Harrington's composure was cracking. You could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched. I have no knowledge of this incident. Perhaps my men acted without orders. That's when I stood up. Couldn't sit still anymore. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I ignored it. Then explain this. I pulled papers from inside my coat. Ezekiel had gotten them the night before, slipped into Harrington's office while the colonel was at dinner. Wasn't exactly legal, but Grant had already said he'd allow it. I unfolded the first paper, a map of Apache territory. Apache. Red ink marked several parcels of land, with estimated timber values written beside them. $30,000. $50,000. Numbers that would make any man's mouth water. I held up the second paper. A letter, written in Harrington's own hand. The handwriting was distinctive, educated, precise. I read it aloud. Sheriff Cooper. Phase 2 complete. Apache family removed from Valley parcel. Land clear for surveying. Send Clem for final cleanup. Burn all evidence. W.H. The crowd erupted. Shouts of anger, disbelief. Grant hammered his gavel. Order! Order in this hearing! But the damage was done. Everyone had heard it. Everyone knew what it meant. Final cleanup. Burn all evidence. Those weren't the words of an innocent man. Harrington's face had gone purple. That's a forgery. That's an illegal search. You can't use that. I can and I will, Grant said. His voice had gone cold, hard as granite. These documents suggest a pattern of criminal behavior, and I have jurisdiction to investigate such matters. He turned to Cooper. Sheriff Cooper, is this your signature on these receipts? I held up another paper. Payment vouchers. $500 to Sheriff Cooper. $1,000 to Mad Dog Clem. All signed and dated. All within 2 weeks of when Naichi said the massacre happened. Cooper's face had gone pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I don't know anything about that. Your signature says otherwise. Cooper looked at Harrington, panic in his eyes. You said no one would know. You said it was legal. Shut up, Dutch. Harrington's mask had finally come off. The civilized businessman was gone. In his place was something mean and desperate. But Cooper had already broken. I didn't want to. But he paid me. He said Apache don't matter. He said we were civilizing the territory. He said it was progress. That's enough. Harrington was on his feet now, shouting, You fool! You absolute fool! Grant stood as well, his voice cutting through the chaos like a sword. Sheriff Cooper, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder after the fact. Two of the men from Ezekiel's congregation, big fellas who'd worked as lawmen before, moved to take Cooper. He didn't resist, just stood there shaking while they bound his wrists. Harrington looked around the square, at the crowd that was now looking at him with horror and disgust, at his own men who were backing away, not wanting to be associated with what was unfolding, at Judge Grant, who held the power to destroy everything he'd built. "You think this changes anything?" Harrington's voice was high now, strained. "I own this town. I own the mayor. I own half the judges in this territory. You can't touch me." Grant's expression didn't change. "You don't own me, and you don't own justice." Harrington's control snapped completely. He wheeled on the crowd, face twisted with rage. "These are savages. They're not people. This land is ours. We built this country. We tamed it. They're nothing but obstacles to progress." The words hung in the air. Several people gasped. Others looked away, ashamed to be associated with such venom. Then Nietzsche stepped forward. She'd been silent through most of this, letting the evidence speak. But now she spoke, and her voice carried across that square clear and strong. "You not build. You steal. You steal land. You steal life. You steal future. But you not steal truth." She placed her hand over her heart. "Truth here. Truth always here. You can kill body. You can burn cabin. You can try erase us from earth. But you cannot erase truth. Truth live in those who see, in those who remember, in those who speak, even when afraid." She looked at Harrington, and there was no fear in her eyes now, only certainty. "Gray Wolf was not my blood father. My father died years before, killed by soldiers. But Gray Wolf took us in when we had nothing. Morning rain fed us when we starved. Running Deer and Little Bird became like brother and sister to us. You kill them, all of them. I see you do it. And I will tell everyone who listens until the day I die what you did. That is my truth. That is my justice." The crowd was silent. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. It was Mrs. Thornton. Slow, deliberate claps that echoed off the buildings. Rosa Garcia joined her, then Miguel, then Ezekiel and his congregation, then old Pete and the veterans. Within moments, half the square was applauding, not for entertainment, for courage, for truth spoken in the face of power. Harrington looked around, saw his support crumbling, made a decision born of desperation. He reached inside his coat. I saw the motion, knew what was coming. "Gun!" Harrington pulled a derringer, small but deadly at close range, aimed it at Nietzsche. "If I hang for this, she hangs with me." Time slowed. I was too far away. My gun was in my belt, couldn't reach it fast enough with my injured shoulder. Harrington's finger tightened on the trigger. Then Red Sky was there, moving faster than a man of 68 had any right to move. He threw himself between Harrington and Nietzsche. The derringer fired. The sound was sharp, loud. Red Sky staggered, hand going to his chest. "No!" I was running, pushing through the crowd. Red Sky fell to his knees. Nietzsche caught him, lowered him gentle to the ground. Harrington stood frozen, the smoking gun in his hand, realizing what he'd just done. In front of 100 witnesses, in front of a judge, there was no talking his way out of this. Old Pete moved first. He was 72, but he moved like lightning. Grabbed Harrington's wrist, twisted. The derringer fell to the dirt. Two more men grabbed Harrington's arms, forced him down. I reached Red Sky. He was breathing, but blood stained his buckskin shirt, spreading fast. Cayeta was already there, pressing cloth against the wound. Her hands were steady despite the tears on her face. "Bullet missed heart," she said. "Hit shoulder. Like bear. I can help." "Do it," I said. The crowd formed a circle around us, gave us space. Judge Grant was shouting orders, organizing men to guard Harrington and Cooper, sending someone to fetch the town doctor. But all I could focus on was Red Sky. His eyes met mine. He tried to smile. "Still pulling you out of trouble?" he whispered. "You old fool. Why'd you do that?" "Because some things are worth dying for." He coughed, winced. Truth, justice, family. He looked at Nietzsche. She is your family now. Don't waste it. You're not dying today, I said, but my voice shook. The doctor arrived, a thin man named Morrison who'd patched up half the injuries in Copper Bend over the last 20 years. He examined the wound, nodded to Kaita. You did good work. Probably saved his life. I can save better if you help, Kaita said. Together, they worked. Morrison used his tools and medicines. Kaita used her herbs and knowledge. Between them, they stabilized Red Sky. By the time they finished, the old man's color was better, and his breathing had steadied. He'll live, Morrison said. Needs rest, but he'll live. The relief that washed over me was like a physical thing. I sat back, suddenly aware of how much my own shoulder hurt, how tired I was, how close we'd all come to disaster. Judge Grant approached, his face grave. Mr. McAllister, I need formal statements from all of you, but given the circumstances, I'm prepared to make a preliminary ruling. The crowd had grown silent again, waiting. Grant raised his voice. By the authority vested in me as Circuit Judge of Montana Territory, I find Colonel Wade Harrington guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, incitement to murder, and attempted murder in the presence of this court. He will be remanded to federal custody in Helena pending trial. He turned to Cooper. Sheriff Dutch Cooper, I find you guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder after the fact. You will also be remanded to federal custody. What about them? Someone in the crowd shouted, pointing at Nietzsche and Kaita. They're still fugitives from the reservation. Grant looked at the two women. They stood together, Kaita's hands still bloody from tending Red Sky's wound, Nietzsche's face exhausted but unbowed. Miss Nietzsche, Miss Kaita, by federal law you should return to San Carlos Reservation. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. But that law is unjust, and I will not enforce unjust laws. He pulled a paper from his coat, began writing. I am hereby issuing a special writ of protection. You are granted freedom of movement in Montana Territory under the guardianship of Jacob Bear McAllister. No federal marshal, no agent of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, no local law enforcement may compel your return to the reservation without a direct order from a federal judge of equal or higher authority than myself. He signed the paper with a flourish, held it up so everyone could see. You are free, not just today, not just until someone changes their mind. Free. Nietzsche's legs gave out. She sank to her knees, not in submission but in relief. Kaita knelt beside her, wrapped her arms around her sister. Both women were crying, silent tears that spoke of years of fear, finally released. I moved to them, put my good hand on Nietzsche's shoulder. She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just gratitude, not just respect. Something deeper, something that made my heart beat faster. You're safe now, I said. She reached up, covered my hand with hers. We safe, together. The crowd began to disperse. Some people came forward to offer congratulations or support. Mrs. Thornton brought fresh bread. Rosa Garcia brought a blanket for Red Sky. Old Pete shook my hand so hard I thought he'd tear the stitches in my shoulder. Ezekiel approached with a wide smile. You did good, Bear. Real good. Couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but you were the one who cut those ropes. He looked at Nietzsche and Kaita. What happens now? Now, I said, we go home. The ride back to the cabin took longer than usual. We moved slow, careful. Red Sky rode with me, slumped against my back. He was asleep, exhausted from the wound and the medicine. Nietzsche and Kaita shared the other horse. The sun was setting by the time we reached the valley. The cabin stood where I'd left it, scarred from the fight, but intact. The shed was burned out, but that could be rebuilt. What mattered was, we were alive, we were free, we were home. Over the next days, people came, more than I'd expected. Miguel and his family came to help rebuild the shed. Old Pete brought tools and timber. Mrs. Thornton brought supplies, refused payment. Even Morrison the doctor came to check on Red Sky's wound and my shoulder, charged us nothing. "We have a debt to pay," he said. "To you. To them. To what's right." "I won't forget that," I said. Red Sky recovered slowly. For the first week he stayed in the cabin, sleeping in my bed while I took the floor. Naiche and Kayeta tended him with a care that went beyond duty. He was their elder, their connection to traditions they'd thought were lost. He spoke to them in Apache, long conversations I couldn't understand but could feel the importance of, teaching them, reminding them, giving them back pieces of themselves. Kayeta discovered she had a gift for healing. People started coming to the cabin, asking for remedies. A logger with the infected cut, a rancher's wife with a fever, a child with a cough that wouldn't quit. Kayeta treated them all, using herbs and techniques her grandmother had taught her. Word spread. The Apache healer at Bear's Place. Fair, skilled, kind. She set up a small clinic in the rebuilt shed. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. Jars of salves and tinctures lined crude shelves. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Her purpose. Her way of contributing not just to our small family, but to the wider community. Rosa Garcia came often, learning from Kayeta, teaching her own remedies in return. A blending of Apache and Mexican knowledge that worked better together than either alone. Watching them work, listening to their quiet conversations, I saw healing happening on more levels than just the physical. Naiche was different. She didn't tend the sick. She worked the land. She'd taken to the mountains like she'd been born to them, could track better than any man I'd known, could read weather, could predict where game would be before I'd even thought to look. She expanded the garden, built a smokehouse, tanned hides with a skill that made my efforts look like child's play. And she worked beside me, every day, mending fences, chopping wood, hauling water. We fell into rhythms without discussion. She'd measure, I'd cut, I'd hold, she'd bind. After a while, we didn't need words. We just knew. One evening, maybe 2 months after the trial, we were working on the roof. Storm had damaged some shingles, needed replacing before the real cold set in. The sun was dropping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Red Sky, like the old man's name. He was watching us from below, sitting on the porch with Kayeta. I could feel his eyes on us, amused and knowing. "You are slow," Naiche said, but there was no criticism in her voice, just observation. "I'm careful." Difference between slow and careful. Apache saying. Careful man live long. Slow man die waiting. I laughed. That's a good saying. Your people have wisdom. We have survived. That is wisdom. She hammered in a nail, tested the shingle. Her movements were precise, economical. Everything she did had purpose. No wasted motion, no wasted anything. It came from years of having nothing to waste. "Bear," she said after a long silence, "can I ask question?" "Always." "Why you never marry again?" "After marry die." "You are good man. Strong. Any woman would be honored." I set down my hammer. It was a question I'd asked myself 1,000 times. Never had a good answer. "I was afraid," I said finally. "Afraid to lose someone again. Afraid I wasn't good enough to protect them. Afraid that loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you." She nodded slowly. "I understand that fear. I have same fear." She looked at me, and in the fading light her eyes were impossibly deep. "But I think maybe being alone is its own kind of destruction. Slower, quieter, but just as final. Maybe you're right. I am right." She smiled just a little, about most things. That made me laugh again. She'd gotten good at that. Making me laugh, making me feel human again. That night after supper, I asked Red Sky to walk with me. We went to the graves behind the cabin. I hadn't been there in weeks, couldn't quite face it, but tonight felt right. "Mary, this is Red Sky. You met him once, remember?" I told the weathered markers. "He saved my life, saved all our lives." Red Sky placed his hand on Mary's marker. "She would be proud of you," he said, "of what you've done, who you've become." "I don't know about that. I do." He turned to me. "You love her." "Nietzsche." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. Watched the last light fade from the sky. Listened to the wind in the pines. Heard Kaita's voice from the cabin, singing something soft and sad. "I think I do," I said finally. "But I don't know if I have the right. Don't know if I'm betraying Mary's memory. Mary is gone." Red Sky's voice was gentle but firm. "She would want you to live, to love, to be happy. Honoring the dead doesn't mean dying with them. She might not want me. She's been through so much. She deserves better than a broken-down mountain man." Red Sky laughed. "That's her choice to make, not yours. You offer, she decides. That is how it works. What if she says no? Then you accept it with grace." "But I do not think she will say no." "How do you know?" "Because I have eyes, and I see the way she looks at you, the way you look at her. I am old, but I am not blind." I stood there for a long time after Red Sky went back to the cabin, thinking, remembering, finally letting go. "I'm sorry, Mary," I whispered to the grave. "Sorry it took me so long to save someone. Sorry I couldn't save you. But I'm going to try to live now. Really live. I hope that's all right." The wind picked up, rustling the aspen leaves. It sounded almost like laughter, like approval. I found Nietzsche by the creek. She was alone, washing her face and hands in the cold water. The moon was up, nearly full, casting silver light across the valley. "I need to tell you something," I said. She turned, water dripping from her fingers. "I am listening. I lost people. Lost them because I was too careful, too slow, too afraid to act until it was too late. I built walls around myself, told myself I was protecting what was left, but really I was just hiding." She waited, patient. "You and Keita, you came into my life like a storm. Unexpected, uncontrolled. And you reminded me what it means to fight, what it means to stand up, what it means to care about something more than your own pain." I took a breath. This was harder than facing down Harrington, harder than anything I'd done in years. I'm not good with words, never have been. But I need you to know that you've given me back something I thought was gone forever. Hope, purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning and think maybe today might be good. She stepped closer. Her face was unreadable. I couldn't tell if I was saying the right things or making a fool of myself. "I'm asking if you'd consider staying. Not as a guest, not as someone under my protection, but as my wife. If you'll have me." The silence stretched. A coyote called in the distance. The creek bubbled over stones. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Then Nietzsche smiled, a real smile, wide and genuine and beautiful. In Apache tradition, man must prove himself, must show he can provide, can protect, can be worthy. I nodded, felt my heart sinking. "I understand. I can wait. I can do whatever you need." She held up her hand, stopping me. "You already do all this. Many times. You cut rope, you fight. You stand in town square and speak truth. You risk everything." She reached out, placed her palm against my chest. Could feel my heartbeat, probably. Could feel how nervous I was. "You prove yourself every day. Every moment." She paused. "Yes. I stay. As wife, as partner, as family." Relief and joy hit me like a physical force. I wanted to sweep her up, spin her around, shout to the mountains. But I didn't. Just took her hand in mine, gentle and careful. "You sure? Because once we do this, I'm not letting you go. I'm stubborn that way. I am sure." She laughed, the sound like music. "And I am more stubborn. Apache way." We stood there by the creek, holding hands, while the moon climbed higher and the stars came out one by one. Two broken people who'd found a way to be whole, not by forgetting the past, but by building something new on top of it. The wedding took place 3 weeks later. Judge Grant came back through, brought a preacher with him. Not a fancy church ceremony. Just a simple exchange of vows in front of the cabin, with the mountains as witnesses. Ezekiel stood with me. Red Sky stood with Naichi. Cayeta held wildflowers she'd gathered that morning. Mrs. Thornton and the Garcias came. Old Pete and Morrison. A dozen others from town. Even some loggers who'd worked for Harrington but wanted to show they were decent men underneath. The preacher kept it simple. Asked if I would take Naichi as my wife. Asked if she would take me as her husband. We both said yes, clear and strong. Then Red Sky stepped forward. In Apache tradition, he said, marriage is not just between two people. It is between two families, two histories, two futures becoming one. He took a leather cord from around his neck. It was decorated with beads and small feathers, worn smooth with age. This belonged to my wife before she passed. She would want Naichi to have it. He tied it around Naichi's wrist. Then he took a similar cord and tied it around mine. These bind you together. Not as chains, as reminder that you choose each other, every day, every moment. That is what marriage is. Choosing. I looked at Naichi. She looked at me. And I chose. Would keep choosing. For as long as I had breath in my body. We had a meal afterward. Nothing fancy. Venison stew, cornbread, apple pie. Mrs. Thornton had baked. People sat on the porch, on the grass, wherever they could find space. They talked and laughed and told stories. It was the most noise my cabin had heard in years. It felt right. As evening came on and people started leaving, Ezekiel pulled me aside. You did good, Bear. Real good. Couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you. Maybe. But you were the spark. You cut those ropes when everyone else walked past. That's what changed everything. Just did what felt right. That's all any of us can do. He clasped my shoulder, careful of the one that was still healing. You take care of them, and let them take care of you. That's the secret. I will. After everyone left, it was just the four of us. Me, Naichi, Cayeta, and Red Sky. We sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. I should build my own place, Red Sky said. You are married now. Need privacy. You'll do no such thing. Naichi's voice was firm. You are family. You stay. She's right, I added. We got room, and we could use your wisdom. Wisdom is just mistakes remembered, Red Sky said. But if you insist, I will stay. For a while. Cayeta leaned against her sister, content. This is good, she said softly. This is home. And it was. Against all odds, against everything that had tried to tear us apart, we'd built something. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, honest, true. The weeks turned to months. Autumn painted the mountains gold. Winter came harsh. We weathered it together. Cayeta's clinic grew. People rode 20 miles seeking her remedies. She trained Rosa Garcia in Apache healing. Rosa trained others. Knowledge spread. Knowledge. One winter morning, a Mexican family appeared at our door. Father, mother, 3 children. Exhausted. Frightened. We hear this place is safe, the father said. For people like us. Is true? I looked at Naichi. She nodded. It's true, I said. You're welcome here. They stayed 3 weeks, then left with supplies and hope. After that, others came. Apache fleeing reservations, black families escaping debt slavery, Chinese workers cheated of wages. One by one, they found us. We never turned anyone away. We'd been those people once. By 1883, our valley sheltered 30 souls year-round. Open Valley Haven, folks called it. Where skin color didn't determine worth. Where character mattered more than blood. Red Sky passed peaceful in his sleep, winter of 1884. We buried him on the ridge. His wisdom lived in everything we'd built. Cayeta married Luis, a Mexican carpenter, in 1885. They had 3 children who spoke English, Spanish, and Apache all mixed together. Naichi and I never had children of our own. But we raised hundreds. Every person who passed through became part of our story. We grew old together, hair white, faces lined, bodies marked by scars earned through living. One summer morning in 1892, We sat on the porch, coffee in hand, shoulders touching. "No regrets?" Nietzsche asked. I looked at her. "Only one. That I didn't cut those ropes sooner." She smiled. "Everything happened when it should." Down in the valley, smoke rose from chimneys. Children laughed. Life continued. My pa's words returned to me. "A man's worth ain't measured by what he takes, but by what he gives when he's got nothing left to lose." I'd lost everything once. But in losing, I'd found freedom to give without fear, to stand without counting cost, to love without holding back. People ask what happened to the mountain man and the Apache woman, how our story ended. It didn't end. It spread. Every person we helped went on to help others. Every kindness paid forward. Every act of courage inspired more. We never made history books, never got monuments. We weren't doing it for glory. We did it because it needed doing, because we'd been given mercy and had to pass it on, because that's what it means to be human. I chose to be the man who cuts ropes, who stands up, who gives when he has nothing left. And in giving everything, I gained what matters most: a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, a legacy built in hearts, not stone. The sun climbed higher, a new day, a new beginning. In the valley below, life continued, just the way it was meant to be.